My brain works differently than some people. MyGuide lessons are built the way my brain thinks.
MyGuide is a specific technology that is compatible with a clinical approach. That technology of MyGuide is a lot more amenable to mapping out whatever that behavior plan was or whatever that clinical plan or treatment plan was. MyGuide's more compatible with it because it can be customized, because there's so many different displays, because there's so many versatile functions on it. It's the clinician's best friend.
Well, being able to have a device in front of you to where you can customize it yourself, I feel like means the world to someone like me with a developmental disability, because other devices out there are customized for you already. But this one, you customize yourself. And that just means all the world to me, because you can make up your own words. You can put your own pictures in it of like your favorite things and stuff like that. And it just opened up a whole new world to me, and to empower me. Thank you so much.
Nice job. Good job. Okay.
Swipe?
Yep. Swipe.
What we need to do is not only provide them access to technology, but we need to customize that technology to meet their needs and be at their level of skill.
Instead of them being the boss, I'm the boss over my medication, over when I'm nervous, over when I'm angry.
MyGuide helps me be more independent by allowing me to make choices and reminds me of what to do if I ever get stuck on something.
So as a clinician, I think the reporting feature is really exciting because you can see, are those steps being followed? It allows me to give a task analysis in the group home situation. We could create a task analysis for washing hands, for example, and I know that every step is using the same language, it's using the same visuals, it's using the same prompts, and so I can easily control that variable.
And when I complete the task, it will send reports to MyGuide, and my mom would get a notification that I did my goodness. It allows me to tell Mom that I'm doing my stuff. I used to have Mom annoy me. With MyGuide, she doesn't have to ask me. She doesn't have to drag me everywhere she goes, because she will know that I'll be doing it or not.
And the beautiful thing with MyGuide is that the intervention is the technology.
We have one young lady that does live on her own in an apartment. She has in-home support that comes in the morning to make sure that she's gets ready for the day, and comes in the evening. Weekends, she doesn't have the support. So they found that she sometimes needs a telephone call to remind her to take her medication. The MyGuide would be in place of that human support. I think this will make it much easier for her to not have to rely on somebody calling or stopping by, especially on weekends. So she's one that I think with MyGuide that she could actually start living on herself with only very minimal support for the rest of her life.
And it really is a good tool to use to help someone like me who struggles with their independence and that needs more reminders, so to speak. It would be a great tool to help them get what they need done and ultimately accomplish the ultimate goal, whatever it is.
Great job. You're all done.
Are we doing the next one?
We can do the next one. High five.
What's next?
Can I get a high five? You're just so into that MyGuide right now.
Hi, everybody. My name's Maria McCourt, and I'm from Empower Me. and we're here today to talk about MyGuide and our response in Virginia to the COVID-19 crisis. We started building MyGuide about 3 years ago. My family did, for my son who has autism, as he was losing his special education supports. And I was looking for some technology-based prompting and ways of helping him express himself. And what I found was that traditional assistive technology compensates for physical deficits. And that wasn't what I was looking for. So we scoured the earth for every kind of autism app that there was and technology, looking for something that addressed cognitive deficits that vary wildly from client to client. And we found something that worked really well to help with these prompt dependencies, not just for tasks and ADLs and IADLs, but actually prompting for thought processes and decision making and making choices, and also prompting him to work through his emotional issues. He's very sensory driven. And so the expression barriers that we noted, it worked very well with once you prompt the client to have a thought process or to emotionally regulate, how do they express that to you? And what we found after a lot of testing with clinicians and special education experts is that there's something about communicating and interacting with an electronic device that is so much easier for them than interacting with a person. And so technological prompting instead of human prompting easily lends itself to supported expression electronically in a way that human supports usually cannot achieve. So we started experimenting, like I said, with new features, and everything was very clinically driven. So in early 2020, we released MyGuide version 10 that was based on all of the clinicians' input. We had families testing it, a lot of experts testing it. And we wanted to make sure that every feature we provided was clinically sound and was available on cross platforms. What we mean by that is, even though MyGuide does pay for an actual device, and it's always an Android-based device, family members and service providers and case managers who want to help the client and monitor the client with using their MyGuide oftentimes have other devices that they use. So MyGuide version 10 is available on iOS, Microsoft, Android, and Amazon. You can also get it on web with some limited features for monitoring. So everyone can use it. It's a simple download. The primary feature that we worked on for version 10 was supported self-expression. And that is how we receive data from the app. We time and date stamp every activity that the client does. So every time they move to a new page, every time they respond to a question, it's all time and date stamped. And so that self-expression data is collected. And at the same time, in order to collect that self-expression data, we have to have personalized prompts. We have to prompt them to tell us exactly what we want them to express. And so we're personalizing the prompting that they have for their cognitive processes. We're priming them, we're prompting them, we're sequencing, we're doing the instruction, all of the things that the clinicians told us are really necessary to do when we're dealing with cognitive deficits. So we have all of this data that is collected. We can see what they've done and what they've responded. And then the most powerful feature is the remote monitoring. That data that we've collected by the MyGuide server is then securely shared with any person that the client consents to us sharing it with. So this could be any caregiver, service provider, family member, clinician, teacher. And I'm going to show you some of those examples in a moment. But everything that is built into MyGuide version 10 is for the purpose of a caregiver remotely monitoring and providing distance caregiving. So we released version 10 a week before COVID-19 hit pandemic status. So with that timing, we have noticed just in the last few weeks, in the initial weeks of the emergency, a severe reduced access to human prompting. So how does MyGuide help with that? Obviously, we can prepare or prompt a client for any activity or experience from a distance. We can use personalized images, audio tracks, which is, we have some clients who only respond to a certain person's voice. Well, what if that person is no longer able to be physically present? We can have an audio recording. The images where their normal surroundings may be different now, just having the same prompting that they're used to and that they're comfortable with, using those same images and audios, sounds. And then the text. What we mean by text here is the actual words that will appear on the screen or that the device will read out loud to the client. Some clients use specific language to motivate them, and there's specific language that really triggers them in a bad way as well. So you can highly customize this. I like to use the example of Dominic a lot because he's my son and he gave me permission to do this. But there was a time when he would do anything I asked him to do only if I used the word dinosaur in the sentence. I could do that with MyGuide because I can change the text very easily. So we have the very first immediate benefit of using MyGuide with a client during this emergency is that we have technological prompting that can replace human prompting when necessary. The second thing is that these individuals are experiencing even further limited self-expression and communication. We're now into week 2 or 3 of social isolation. If they already had a problem expressing themselves, they're probably not doing a whole lot of communicating now. And they also don't have the supports available to them because they have reduced access to human services in general. So how does MyGuide help with that? Well, we have pre-programmed questions and response options, and this comes from speech therapists, occupational therapists, and ABA therapists. If a client with a cognitive deficit is asked a question, they lack not only the perhaps physical ability to respond, but the cognitive ability to form the words. They also have cognitive challenges with figuring out the answer that they want to give. So by providing a pre-programmed question and a set of response options that they can choose from, the client, a lot of that work is kind of done for them, and it's done automatically on a device that's very non-threatening. And we can get very customized with it. So for each programmed question and response option page, you can choose whether the client is going to select one of those choices or multiple choices from those response options. They can choose an image with or without text. They can also do voice controlled responses. So if they have a problem with paralysis or they're not able to have the dexterity that they need to tap an answer, there is an option on the Android devices to have a voice controlled, and we can get into that later with your clients who need that. So what we're finding with the self-expression and communication advancement with the MyGuide is that we can now ask them questions that we couldn't even ask them before. So if they were in a day program setting and you ask them, "How are you today?" they may have a canned response that they've learned to use, but they may or may not be really actually answering that question. But with MyGuide, on their own time, they can really think about the question that's being asked, and they are presented with potential response options. What do you want to eat today? And they see pictures of their favorite cereal or bagels or eggs or something else, and they can just tap the picture. So we've also learned with science that it's proven if a client is given a pre-programmed question and some response options, and they physically tap an answer and they verbally speak a different answer, it's usually the physically tapped answer that is the more accurate one. So, and that's science backed. All the clinicians already knew that going into this. So we learned that fun little fact. Then the third thing, this is the scariest one probably during this crisis, is that there's increased safety concerns and prolonged social isolation impact. So human connectivity at a distance is a challenge for everybody always. I took care of my grandparents. My mom took care of my grandparents from several states away. It's a need that's already out there. But now with COVID-19, everybody has to do distance caregiving. And MyGuide does help with that. We provide a distance caregiving tool. Not only is the MyGuide device an actual phone that has video conferencing capabilities with the tap of a button, but it also allows clients to interact with people on their own terms at the right time in the right place without causing any increased exposure to the virus. So the other thing that MyGuide can do is we have pre-programmed health and safety checks, and we can use the responses to those checks as a remote monitoring system. And we're going to show you some examples of that. So if you have a caseload of 100 clients that are all socially isolating, how do you determine which ones need your attention and which ones are okay? Well, what if they all had a morning check-in that said, I'm healthy and safe? You don't have to worry about them. But the ones who didn't even check in, or the ones who say, I might need a phone call, those are the ones that you can focus on. With MyGuide remote monitoring system, you can do that. You can actually do it in real time. So I want to show you what some of this looks like, and then Kevin's going to do some demonstrations. So for supported self-expression, what we're trying to do is give the client a voice and choice. And these are some of the examples of what you can build and customize. These are already existing. These are straight out of the public library. So you can see how this client would be able to answer by text, by reading, or they could have text to speech turned on so that the device reads all of these options out loud for them. And if you see a circle, that means they're allowed to choose one. And in some other examples, you'll see a checkbox, a square. That means they're allowed to make multiple selections. So this one is how are you feeling? And it gives them all these options. So they can choose a picture or the text, and they have an audio track attached to this one. This could be mom's voice asking, how do you feel? Or it could be the dog barking. It could be anything that triggers a positive emotional response for the client. And then this one is the medication is a very popular one. Clients like to be able to report that they did something, or that they remembered something, or that they accomplished something. Just by checking these off is giving them independence and participation in their own life. How are you right now? This is giving them a voice. If they can't come up with the words, they can choose from these three options that maybe their support coordinator wants to know, and ask them to play this guide at least once a week, once a month, whatever. These are some examples of prompting, priming, and sequencing. We can do this with any task or thought process. And there's a couple of different features on here that I'd like to point out. This one has a timer. And this is for a client who's gathering their things to get ready to take a shower. And it has a timer on it that it might play music too. This one has audio and a timer. So I wonder what that is. Then we have the check boxes. This is where I explained before, they could check multiple things off. This is where they can only check one thing off. Now with this timer, you can also set it so that they cannot advance past this slide until the timers run out. So if they need to brush their teeth for 2 minutes, then you can make the slide locked so that they cannot move past brush your teeth until after the 2 minutes has passed. This is the third function that MyGuide offers, the remote monitoring. So if caregivers, service providers, or case managers are trying to monitor the activities and the needs of a client, there are endless ways of programming questionnaires and assessments and all kinds of guides that could have pictures, they could have audio tracks, they could have timers, multiple choice, single choice, free flow answer. All of these things, you will get the data. The caregivers will see every single page, how long they spent looking at the page, what the answers were. If they go back a page and change their answer, you'll be able to see all of that. So it's very powerful remote monitoring, and it's all secure. So what we want to do with all of these features is we want to accomplish some very specific objectives that we set out to accomplish, and some new ones that we found are possible, especially during this crisis that we're in. We always want to increase independence and self-determination wherever we can. And we want to improve the communication that our clients have and the engagement that they have with their community providers. And that means something a little bit different this month than it did last month. So any possible opportunity to improve communication and engagement, to increase independence and self-determination remotely, and while caregivers are at a distance, this is something that we have to try. We have to at least try this. And MyGuide makes it super easy to do that. But in addition to that, we found we now have increased safety and increased access to services that we didn't even realize was going to be a problem the day before we heard about COVID-19. But now distance caregiving and remote monitoring is not only possible, it's very effective and easy with MyGuide.
For those with special needs, MyGuide is designed to provide step-by-step instructions and prompts for communicating their needs and preferences. Guides can be edited with customized images, text, audio files, and pre-programmed questions with response options. As a guide is played, MyGuide will securely share selections and responses with designated caregivers in real time or in aggregated reports.
Milk. Sandwiches. Goldfish and sandwiches. Honeydew. Goldfish and sandwiches. And crackers. Popcorn. Homework. Chores and homework. Exercises, chores and homework.
Can I have a high five?
What's next?
Can I have a high five too?
What's next?
MyGuide helps users with self-expression and independence, allowing them to be empowered.